Welcome to the June monthly market report. I am excited to get started right now. There's a lot happening in real estate. We're going to be talking about prices and sort of what's happening there. Start off with inventory because that's driving up and that is having an impact on prices. And we'll also talk about expired listings. And if you're wondering what are expired listings, they're really properties that go on the market, sit there for a while, don't sell, and fall off the market. RedX is showing expired listings rising by almost 20% to date compared to last year. And so that's an important thing we may want to pay attention to as well. So let's go ahead and get started with the June market report. All right, I'm going to start off with this quote here from Danielle Hale. The number of homes for sale is rising in many markets, giving shoppers more choices than they've had in years, and sellers are becoming more flexible on pricing. That's a good thing, right? Underscored by the price reductions we are seeing. And while mortgage rates are certainly weighing on demand, higher mortgage rates, the silver lining is that the market is starting to rebalance. And this could create opportunities for buyers who are prepared. There's no doubt right now that we're seeing inventory rise. We're seeing that have an impact on the market. Sellers need to, sort of be aware of that and what's happening. I think the best way to maybe explain this is this graphic right here that we've used before. And listen, the headline of this says that all inventory is topped a million active listings for the first time since the winter of 2019. That's a big number. And I sort of think about this graphic as, if you take the sort of darker bars right here, those are the last three, what I would call the last 3 normal years in real estate. If you look across here, and that's 17, 18, and 19. The red bar is the dividing line in a lot of cases, the year of the pandemic, 2020. Then you see a 5-year cycle of inventory depletion, 21, 22, 23, 24, and sort of the recovery of that. And when we lay in right up until May this year, and you'll see kind of crossing the line of 2020. We talked about this a couple of months ago in the monthly market report, where we'll likely end this year in a place that's very similar to where we've ended 2017 and 2018. It just gives you a good visual picture of what's happening with inventory in the country right now. And so we want to pay attention to that. But the reality right now is no two markets or even two regions are the same. And this is a look at where inventory is growing maybe the fastest and is still lagging behind. The way you read this graphic is the blue bars show inventory growth year over year. So if we take an example, the far left there, the Midwest, 22, almost 23% inventory growth year over year, but still down 41% from pre-pandemic levels. So Midwest and Northeast still considerably down from pre-pandemic levels. And then you kind of switch to the South and the West, both growing year over year, but both above pre-pandemic levels. So more inventory right now in the South and the West than what we saw prior to 2020. That's an important sort of aspect to pay attention to. Logan from Housing Wire said this: the increase in inventory is also promising and supports long-term stability in the housing market. I agree 1000%. As wages rise and households are formed through marriage and dual incomes, this influx of inventory returning to normal levels provides an optimistic outlook. So let's pause for a second here. Rising inventory across the country coming out of the last 5 years, and certainly we can say the last several years, 21, 22 unhealthy, then we've seen higher mortgage rates impact 23 and 24. Here we sit today and sort of returning to this more balanced market, affordability being a challenge, but I want to draw out a couple of things. First of all, the reality of the market that we sit in is very different than the last several years. Anything other than normal, we know that, but this is a really good look from the census and realtor.com of the cumulative housing deficit, or basically surplus, all the way back to 2012. So what you see is 2012 on the left, there, and sort of this bounce around from deficit to surplus, maybe kind of even there in 2017. But kind of starting in 2018 on, we have this housing deficit, and we know the reason for that, right? Builders just didn't keep up with construction post 2008. We don't have the number of homes that we need in this country. Everybody wants to buy, low mortgage rates come in, and we know the story of that. But certainly, if 2023 was short of the deficit we're coming out, I think that we'll look at 2025 and that red bar will be a lot shorter. And Realtor.com said this: at the 2024 rate of consumption, it would have taken 7.5 years to close this housing gap. Now, I'm not here to say it's going to take 7.5 or shorter or longer, but what I'm saying is we still have a deficit in this country. A lot of headlines are saying right now that there are more sellers than buyers and all of those things. The thing that's weighing in the headwind, that's weighing in obviously, is affordability. But we're still undersupplied in this country. That is an important thing to keep in mind. But as inventory rises in just about every market, it's having an impact on prices. Home prices across the country are impacted, and I think the bottom line is pricing a home right is critical in today's market. I'm going to break down a couple of surveys that we're seeing. I talked about rising expired listings in the country right now, but this is a survey from Realtor.com where 8 in 10 potential homes have, the sellers think they will get their asking price or more. So you have 80% of sellers who are like, absolutely, we'll get this asking price or more, maybe, tied to something in the rear view mirror, a price or a sort of circumstance in the market that they're like, okay, yeah, we'll definitely get that. Well, the reality is, from the National Association of Realtors, 4 out of 10 sold their home for less than their asking price. Also from NAR, 1/3 of sellers had to reduce their asking price. And so I'm going to break this down by state in just a minute, but what we know is price reductions are happening. It's obvious. And then listings are also expiring. That is all an impact or a byproduct of what we're seeing right now in the market and growing inventory levels. It's having a massive impact. If we break this down even further all over the country, price reductions have happened. A couple of years ago, you didn't have to reduce the price of a listing because everything would sort of sell so quickly. But if we sort of break this down real quick, Texas, 23% of the active listings in the month of May had a reduction. 18% in California, 21% in Georgia, 24% in Florida. You see them all over the country. Price reductions are happening. It's because of an unrealistic mindset or thought process from the sellers. Danielle Hale said this: the rising share of price reduction suggests that a lot of sellers are anchored to prices that aren't realistic in today's housing market. Today's sellers would be wise to listen to feedback that they're getting from the market. When they go on an open house, after they list, just listen to the feedback. And Redfin said this: sellers are pricing higher based on comps from the past rather than current demand. The market right now is changing so quickly. It's changing almost week to week. So you can't base it off comps from 90 days ago. So today's list price growth is accelerating while sales price growth is decelerating. Let me say that again. Make sure you got it right. List price growth is accelerating while sales price growth is decelerating. Back in 2020, both were up into the right or accelerating. This is a look at the median sales price and the median asking price charted over time. It goes all the way back to 2021 to the beginning of 2021. And what you see, they sort of travel in tandem, or they've got this sort of symbiotic relationship. But what's happened the last several months, the median asking price has gone up dramatically while the median sales price has not. You see that gap, the gap that's forming right here? What does it mean? People are listing their homes much higher and they're expiring. We'll talk about that in a minute, and I have data to prove it. That's why pricing something right is critically important right now. Let's take a look at this. Redfin says this: when buyers and sellers are on different planets, one side eventually has to give in. And it's looking like it's going to be sellers. Rising inventory and price drops and seller concessions indicate this is already starting to happen. And sales price growth will likely continue to slow as a result. Listen, I can't say enough about this. Let's take a look at another one. Homes.com said the best way to determine your selling price is to talk with an expert and get a pulse on the market. Remember to consider the differences between your home and what others recently sold for. Well, even better, remember to consider the differences between your home and what others on the market are selling for. Be realistic about your home and what the market could net you based on its condition. This is a professional's market. This is the time for you sellers to work with realtors who are willing to tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear. Let me tell you that again. This is the time for sellers to work with realtors who are willing to tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear, by showing you what they're seeing in the market and how you could navigate it. Because, if you don't have that honest conversation, maybe you say you think the home's worth this and it's not. And what happens? You end up with an expired listing. So I want to maybe break this down for just a few minutes and give you a state of expired listings. This is a look at the median days on market in May of each year, going back to 2021. So what you're seeing here is the gradual rise of days on market. Nationally, we can tell days on market is rising. We can also tell inventory is rising. This will look at May of each year, going back to 2021, the active listing counts in the month of May. I mentioned we just crossed over 1 million active listings in this country. So days on market rising, active listings rising. And what's the third thing we know? Existing home sales are down. The velocity of transactions, certainly not what it was back in 21, 22, and has fallen largely due to the headwinds of affordability and all the things that we know about uncertainty in the economy and people wondering what's ahead and should I buy a home right now. So this is a formula for expired listings. Days on market rising, inventory rising, and sales down equals expired listing. So if a home's not priced right, it expires. We've got a lot of phenomenal data on this. Redex said expired listings are up 17.6% when comparing January through May of 2025 with the same time frame in 2024. Trends look like as we could end the year as high as 20% more than last year. So it makes sense. It makes sense that a listing would expire given the sort of the current climate of what's happening in real estate. So let's break this down. More than a third of the listings that expired between May of last year and May of this year have relisted. Okay, so 37.8 you see in this green bar of the listings that expired, canceled, or withdrawn. About a third have relisted so far. Okay, so some people just gave up. Some people said, we want to sell the home. Of those that were relisted, 70% are sold and 30% didn't sell. So if you're going to sell your house, right, you want to get it relisted. That makes sense. We get that, right? Now, what did they do? This is where I love the information that Redex brings us. Most sellers at this point relisted at a lower price. Again, this is this year, January through May, of the sellers who relisted at 40%, relisted at a lower price. 37.3 to see if they are at the same price. Some went to a higher price, that's interesting, but most were at the same price or a little bit lower. The ones that relisted sold at a lower price. 68.4% of the green portion here sold lower than the expired price. As we wrap up the June monthly market report, here's your key takeaway. Rising inventory, shifting seller expectations, and affordability challenges are reshaping today's market. Pricing right and partnering with the right real estate expert can make all the difference for you. Whether you're buying, you're selling, or just watching the market, staying informed gives you the edge. Thanks for watching, and if you found this helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I will see you next month with more insights to help you navigate the ever-changing housing market.